Welcome back to lesson 2 of module 2, and in this lesson we're going to be talking all about the fear. Now, fear is a really interesting topic, and when I learned about it, it changed a whole lot for me and in my behavior. So I hope that it does the same to you. So let's get straight into lesson 2, fear. The first thing I want you to understand is that fear is a natural emotion. It is impossible not to feel fear. Fear is a natural emotion. Now, to give you a bit of a background as to why we have that naturally, I'm going to get into the science of the brain a little bit. Now, back in the day, in primal times, we would often be faced with situations that were dangerous. So that might be a situation where we need to hunt an animal and that animal's pretty big and scary, or we need to face a battle or something like that. In that moment, there's a part of our brain, it's called the amygdala. In other words, sometimes I call it the driver. That part of our brain will trigger the emotion of fear. The reason it does that is because it's protecting us from the situation we're in. Now, back in the day when we were faced with scary, dangerous situations, that was necessary, that was needed. We needed that something to tell us, get out of this situation, protect yourself. However, now, we're not in those situations anymore. And yes, we're sometimes in scary situations. And that in that case, fear would be great because it would protect us. But we're often experiencing fear when we do something new nowadays. So this might be when I go to a job interview, or when I hear that there's a new opportunity that I'm too scared to enter for, or when I want to try a new technique in my hair colouring services or hair styling services, or anything new that we've not done before or had a lot of experience in. That part of our brain, the driver, the amygdala, will trigger fear. The reason it's doing that, again, for the same reason, is that it's protecting you. It's telling you this is scary, this is new, you need to get out of here and you need to get yourself out of the situation. The problem with that is that a lot of the time we will believe the emotions we feel. We will believe the way our mind is telling us or tricking us into feeling. If we feel fear, we often avoid situation. We're scared, so we think that's our body's way of saying to us, get out. We need to understand, and in this sense, this is how we battle fear or beat fear. We need to start understanding how to feel that fear, but continue to do the action anyway. And we'll talk a bit more about how to do that. So, I'm going to talk through a few different types of fear. And while I'm explaining this, I would love you to start putting yourself in this situation and figure out whether this applies to you. Now, one of the biggest things that I notice within hairdressing or any creative job actually, but with most hairdressers that I've worked with, including myself, fear of starting is a really, really big type of fear that often affects us. So, like I said earlier, when we try anything new, we're going to feel fear because that part of our brain is telling you you're in a new, scary situation, so remove yourself so that you can protect yourself. So anything new we do comes with fear. Anything creative we do, as per the last quote we just said, comes with fear. So there's always going to be a fear when you start something new. So bear that in mind. So when you look at yourself and think, okay, you might feel creatively blocked or creatively anxious, you have to think about actually, are you blocked or are you just fearful? If you're fearful and you can notice that behavior in yourself, then you can start overcoming how to feel that or how to get a good result regardless of that. And starting is the only way to be ready. You will never be ready if you're waiting for yourself to be ready. So if you're feeling like I'm not going to take on that step in my career because I'm just not quite ready, or I'm not going to take on that client or try that new technique or skill because I'm not quite ready, or I've just come off a balayage course and I'm not going to apply the balayage skills I learned to my clients just yet because I'm not quite ready. In all of those situations, or any other situations you can think of when you thought you weren't ready, you will never be ready if you wait for that. Starting, physically doing the thing, is the only way to be ready. The next is, again, something very common among hairdressers, the fear of the unknown. This applies very much so in our services because our creations are always unknown before we start. No matter how in-depth your consultation might be, how in-depth you've thought about how to create this certain result a client wants, no matter how many steps you've taken to get rid of your creative anxiety, the result is always going to be unknown. Now, yes, there is a certain level of creative confidence that comes with that. So the more confident you are in your skills and your ability, the more you understand your techniques, the less that fear of the unknown will be there, will be present. But until something is created and you've physically seen the result, it's always going to be unknown. So that applies a lot in our daily jobs. Now, our brains are most of the time used to being in control of a situation because we either let our brains think for us, and as we know so far, some of the emotions we feel in our mind aren't always true or necessary or realistic. So we let our brains think for us and take control. Now, when we are in any situation like we've just discussed in terms of a client service, if we don't know what the result is going to be, we feel uneasy and we feel like we're in a situation that is new. And therefore, we know that when we feel something new or we're experiencing something new, our brain will tell us to feel fear and get out and protect ourselves. So essentially, we're feeling that fear of the unknown or that fear of not knowing what our results will be like because our minds aren't taking control every single day, because we have a job that involves the fear of the unknown quite a lot. Now, the first thing to do is accept that. Accept that we are working in the fear of the unknown. But it's about partly that confidence within your creativity and your ability and your skill, which we hopefully have been working through a little bit. But it's also that idea of knowing how to beat that fear. How do we do that? We learn to let go of control. Now, this is not something that's going to happen overnight, but learning to let go of control is going to be one of your biggest ways of learning how to get over fear. Next type of fear is the fear of being illogical. Now, in that kind of wording, you may not recognize the behavior, but the more I talk about it, the more I can promise you this refers to hairdressers. So we compare and we shy away from our own creative ideas quite a lot, and that's literally because we compare those ideas to other people's. Now, when I say fear of being illogical, what I mean is we might come up with a new section pattern for a haircut, but because we haven't seen a bigger artist or somebody else teaching that in the industry, we think that's illogical. Therefore, we start to filter our own ideas to suit the needs of other techniques that we've learned. We can't analyze and create at the same time. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because when we're creating something and we fear that it's illogical or we fear it's not good enough, that's us being creative and assessing and analyzing at the same time. Analyzing and creativity happen in two different parts of the brain. In order to get full potential from your creativity, you need to stop, and we have to basically let go of the idea of analysing while you're creating. So if you're creating something that you feel is a little bit illogical or you've seen nobody do before, create it and then analyse later. And one of the ways that you can do this is to accept your own identity of creation. So the more you become more confident creating ideas that you have personally come up with instead of taking inspiration from other people or comparing yourselves to other people, should I say, the more you'll become more confident in your identity, your creative identity, and the more you can let go of the fact that your ideas aren't logical. The next one is the fear of being judged. Now, again, a massive one that happens in our kind of career. The biggest thing that gets in the way of our own creation is the fear of being judged. The fear that the client's not going to like the work, which is the biggest one. The fear that we're actually going to judge ourselves and think, what were you doing when you were creating that result? Or the fear that you might put your picture on social media and people won't like your hairdressing result as much as somebody else's. We simplify our own ideas and our own creations, hair color techniques, hair color formulations, hair cutting styles, whatever that might be. We filter it down so that it suits the masses, so the technique and the skill and the way that people are doing things in the industry the most. We also find it hard to accept compliments. So if you do have that fear of being judged, it can also be really strange to accept a compliment, and so we reject them. We find it uncomfortable. If somebody says you've just done that hair color so well and so skillfully, we'll find it almost hard to believe that they're talking to us. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is the fear of revealing yourself. So the more you work on something, the more vulnerable it can feel. So for example, if you had trouble gaining a certain skill or level of skill in your freehand highlighting technique, let's use that as an example. The more you work on that, the more it becomes a vulnerable thing. Now, the more you work on that, the more vulnerable it feels, and therefore the more hard it is to then reveal the result of what you've been working on. So if you have been feeling a little bit uncomfortable with your freehand highlighting technique, you'll apply a lot of time, effort and money into developing that skill if it's something you really want to achieve. And then when it comes to actually performing a freehand highlighting technique on a client, that's going to feel super vulnerable. So you're going to feel a bit of a fear of revealing yourself. This makes it far outside your comfort zone to show it off. So it's uncomfortable to show off what you've been working on. Your answer to that is reconnect to your why. Now, if you have been working or developing your skill in your freehand highlighting technique, why have you been doing that? What is it that you've wanted to achieve? Where was your goal when you were really working on that particular skill? This again applies to your next step in your career. Why were you working on becoming an educator? What was your reason for entering that competition? The more you connect to your why, the less scary it is or fearful you'll feel when you reveal yourself. So what does this mean for me? Now I want you to start picking up on which of those fears that you can relate to the most, or if you can relate to all of them, start to notice those behaviors in yourself. Maybe even jot down certain circumstances that you felt those particular fears before. And then I want you to figure out how, if you overcame those fears in those moments with the answers I just gave you, how that result could have gone. So think about this, have a little moment of reflection, jot some ideas down, and then actually look at that and reflect and think, okay, going forward, what am I going to change? Take some time with that because it's going to be a big, big teller for your story going forward.